So I think Avengers Endgame has been out long enough for a spoiler-filled review to be okay. In this video, I don't really want to do a review of sorts, but more of a discussion around the film. This video will be a little bit longer than my usual videos, as I aim to unpack all the major talking points, in my opinion, from Avengers Endgame. Here is a list of the things I'll be talking about. I will timecode everything in the description, so if you want to hear my thoughts on a certain point, just skip ahead, or don't, and listen to me go on about a film regarding an evil space alien who collects magical stones, which can literally wipe out half the universe. The decision is in your hands, but please watch it. It took bloody ages to make this video, and I really crave acceptance. So it's probably best to start this video with the plot. Now for me, the plot is not particularly cohesive, especially when compared to Infinity War. I personally preferred Infinity War more than Endgame, and the cohesive plot did play a role in that. Of course, I am willing to accept though that the plot to Avengers Endgame, a 3-hour-long film, which is the culmination of 22 previous films coming together for one final ending, would have a messy plot, and I think the Russos did an excellent job with the structuring of Endgame. However, the plot is a bit muddled and feels like 3 separate films all kind of smashed into one. I did enjoy the time travel element and revisiting the previous films within the MCU, the slow starting first act which places all our main characters and their state of mind, and of course the big battle fight at the end. I don't think the plot could have been constructed much better, but there is definitely a lot on screen and a difficult film to process first time round, and a second viewing definitely helps in keeping up with the uncohesive structure. The plot is good, but it isn't structured particularly well. I essentially touched on this in my discussion about the plot of Endgame, but for me, Infinity War is the better film. Both Endgame and Infinity War though are fantastic films, but I just think Infinity War edges Endgame in overall quality, as well as Infinity War having a more cohesive plot, which is made even more impressive considering Infinity War has more characters at its disposal compared to Endgame. I think the set pieces are much better, and there is some actual colour on screen instead of a fairly bland colour palette, which is shown in Endgame. Infinity War feels more comic booky, if that's even a term. Of course, the ending fight of Endgame feels like it's ripped straight from a comic book. I just wish there was that injection of colour. I think Infinity War also benefits from having such a great villain, a part of its story. Thanos in Endgame felt very different, which is something I will come on to. Probably one of my very few disappointments with Endgame, Thanos is essentially an entirely new character in Endgame due to the time travel aspect of the film. The Thanos from Infinity War is dealt with pretty quickly at the start of Endgame and is just killed right away. The plot then kicks into gear, and the Thanos from 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy is the one to turn up and fight the Avengers. Except there is no connection between this Thanos and our Avengers, as he hasn't completed these actions from Infinity War as of yet. It leaves the character feeling kind of hollow. Although we the audience know Thanos' future actions, he does not, and this no longer feels quite like the rematch we was waiting for. I think this is especially highlighted when Scarlet Witch says a line, "You took everything from me," for which Thanos replies, "I don't even know who you are." It's a shame, as I would have preferred Thanos of Infinity War to be able to continue in Endgame and have one last fight with the Avengers to decide the fate of the universe. I will however say I did enjoy the fact Thanos was depowered, as he was lacking the stones. It was cool to actually see Thanos for just Thanos and see how powerful he truly is. I remember in Guardians of the Galaxy, Korath says to Ronan that Thanos is the most powerful being in the universe. The audience actually never saw him for the warrior he was before he obtained the stones, so it was cool to kick Captain America for an Iron Man's ass without the use of the Infinity Stones. We now have an actual understanding of what Thanos' power set actually was, which is a nice addition. Before going to see Endgame, I had read a few reviews saying that Hawkeye was probably the standout character from the film. I disagree with this statement. Whilst it was nice to see Jeremy Renner return to the role of Hawkeye/Ronan, there wasn't actually a lot for him to do in this film. His family die early on in the film, and this is a great opening scene with a lot of emotion. The thing is, Hawkeye doesn't really do much. He becomes a somewhat anti-hero called Ronan, which is touched upon but never looked into with much detail. Rhodey tells Black Widow that the things he's doing are awful and the Avengers may not want to find him, but Natasha finds him and Hawkeye joins the Avengers immediately. There is no resistance. This partnered with the fact also the awful stuff Clint has done is rarely touched upon by the other Avengers. It's all pretty much glossed over just to get Clint back into the Avengers, and this loses a lot of conflict. Perhaps some of the other Avengers should have questioned why he was allowed onto the team now he'd become such a brutal anti-hero. Perhaps the Hawkeye series on Disney Plus will look into Clint's time as Ronan, as I personally would love to see that, and I think some interesting stories could be told. However, in Endgame I feel Hawkeye got a little bit pushed to the side, even though I did enjoy his appearance thoroughly. The Hulk is pretty cool in this film. Bruce Banner has finally managed to merge his two conflicting personalities into one, and essentially has control over the Hulk. This element of the character is kind of glossed over in Endgame, and not really looked into how Bruce actually managed this feat, something that seemed basically impossible 4 years ago with Age of Ultron. Personally, I always got the impression that the Hulk was essentially another character with his own personality living inside Bruce Banner, and when the Hulk was out, it was basically a new character on the screen. Endgame seems to suggest now the Hulk is just Bruce Banner, but big and green. It's cool to see a Professor Hulk, and the character of Hulk has been misused, especially in Age of Ultron. I was becoming tired of seeing the same old rage-filled Hulk struggling to control his alter ego. So it was nice to see the character has grown in some way, and we are going to see new elements added to the character. However, I would like a film which does look into Bruce Banner controlling the Hulk and understand, is it a sense of just Bruce is in control, similar to how just the Hulk was in control in Ragnarok when he said there was no Banner, only Hulk. Is there now only Banner and no Hulk? What has happened to the Hulk personality within Banner? A lot has been said about the characterization of Thor in Endgame, with him being somewhat comic relief of the film, which takes away from the emotion of Thor's tragic character within the MCU. I mean, he has lost his father, mother, brother, best friend, girlfriend, and even his homeworld, yet he's still joking about it. People have even gone so far to say the Russos have ruined the character of Thor. Another point people seem to bring up is the fact he is fat shamed in this, which I don't agree with. I want to talk about these points and give my own views personally, as I love the characterization of Thor in Endgame. So starting off, the fact Thor plays for a lot of laughs when discussing his personal tragedy doesn't take away from these elements, neither does it diminish their effects or lessen their impact. Thor's characterization has changed a fair bit, especially between the Dark World and Thor Ragnarok. From being a very serious and bland character, he is now more jokey and uses his humour to mask pain. It's very common for people within this world to hide their own problems behind jokes. We know Thor is leading quite a tragic life now and is a shadow of his former self. We don't need a big scene where he breaks down and discusses all his problems, as there is enough of that in the film with each character. People are different and show or hide pain differently. Thor hiding his own tragedy behind humour is very in line with the way the character is being written currently. In regards to Thor and fat shaming, I never got that within the film. Yes, Thor becomes fat and is played for some laughs, but it's to represent his downfall into his depression and anxiety, becoming a shadow of his former self. I think a key moment within Endgame where it is obvious the Russos are not fat shaming Thor is the final battle. Thor summons the lightning, gets his full outfit, and I expected, oh here we go, he'll become muscular Thor, but he doesn't. He stays as fat Thor. And I think the message here is being out of shape isn't a hindrance when doing the right thing. He might not be muscular, but he can still be a hero. Being a hero doesn't rely on big muscles, it relies on being brave and wanting to do the right thing. It showed that Thor isn't made by his physique, he is made by being good of heart and willing to fight for his friends and the good of the universe. I for one thought it was a great message that everyone can be a hero. What a great ending to Captain America's story. A character who has always been shown to be the epitome of a selfless hero, always fighting for what is right and being an inspiration to millions of people. If anyone in the MCU story deserves some sort of happy ending, it was Cap. When you think about it, Steve Rogers has such a tragic story. He lost his love, his best friend for a while, and essentially his life. He was thrown into this time period but doesn't belong at all. I truly thought Captain America would die in this film, making the ultimate sacrifice for what is right and being his usual selfless self. And I would have been okay with that. However, him dancing with Peggy at the end of Endgame was the beautiful tear-jerking ending I never knew I wanted. The fact that this ending is so understated in a big, huge blockbuster film is perfect. The film is so loud and it's full of jam-packed action that it's nice to have this sweet moment to bring the story to its conclusion. The ending has opened up some plot holes which the Russos have explained, but it doesn't matter because this ending is so fitting, beautiful and well earned for Steve Rogers. A great end to a brilliant story. Robert Downey Jr. was fantastic in this film. After Iron Man 3, Tony Stark's arc was kind of bland. I've said before Age of Ultron that this film does a terrible job of adding towards Tony's story. He learns basically nothing in that film, and I think the Russos recognised this in Civil War, where they looked more into Tony and the emotional place he was in after all the events of previous MCU films. Adding in his daughter for Endgame was a great move. Now there are some stakes towards Tony Stark's ultimate sacrifice. If he didn't have a daughter, yes, he's his death is sad, but what are the actual stakes for him? He is so desperate to ensure he doesn't lose what he loves when Hulk undoes the snap that ultimately he realises he must sacrifice himself in order for the universe to continue, and for his own daughter. The death scene is a very touching moment. After he snaps his fingers, Tony Stark doesn't actually say any more. His line, "I am Iron Man," is the last thing he ever says. It's such a fitting close to his story, and I think the Russos did an outstanding job with Tony Stark in this film. And whilst it was sad to see him die, the ending felt earned. So Black Widow died, cool. I mean, I like Scarlett Johansson and I like the character of Black Widow, but her death to me felt like Marvel doesn't really know what to do with her character other than make her sacrifice her life in order to add some emotional stakes to the film. Her death scene was done very well and I did feel a lot of emotion when watching it, but honestly speaking, Black Widow hasn't done all that much in the MCU. She hasn't had many shining moments and barely had an arc within the MCU as a whole. Some sort of backstory has been hinted to, like in Age of Ultron and the Winter Soldier, but these plot lines have never been fully explored and have always been on the back burner. Losing Black Widow within the MCU isn't a huge loss in terms of storytelling, but it is a shame Scarlett Johansson was never given the opportunity to shine as this character, as I felt her work in the Marvel Universe has been fantastic. I am looking forward to her solo film, which I assume will be a prequel, and hopefully flesh her character out a little bit more. But ultimately, her death scene didn't really resonate with me, and I don't think it's a massive shame to be losing this character in the MCU. The ending battle is so cool. I truly felt like I was reading panels of a comic book whilst the scene played out. All the Marvel heroes on screen fighting in absolute chaos. I mean, you have Giant Man punch a literal flying alien out of the sky. It's awesome. The battle does suffer from the age-old Marvel problem of two faceless armies facing off one another, but this battle is done so well, it doesn't matter. And most of the battle focuses on our heroes and their objective with getting the gauntlet the hell out of there. The battle does well in also focusing largely on Thanos and his mission to obtain the gauntlet. I do have one problem though. I felt the set piece was pretty boring. I mean, it's just a load of rubble and drab colour palette which doesn't ooze much charisma. If this scene was to really embrace its madness, some colour would be injected into it. I mean, it's such a bonkers scene, some colour would really show how much Marvel is loving this film and their characters. But instead, it's a very grey sky with grey rubble and just a load of dirt, and it's not that vibrant, and I just wish it had that colour to just make it a bit more energetic. It's an age-old problem that Marvel films are very bland, and I think it's just the style of the Russos because all their films within the MCU have been very bland colour paletted. But other than that, this battle scene was probably my favourite scene in the whole film. This film has so much fan service, it's incredible. I usually hate fan service. Scratch that, I hate poorly done fan service. The Marvel films have usually done very well with their nods to the fans, except maybe Age of Ultron. What I dislike most is where films stop dead to set up future films, which is a trap Marvel haven't really ever fell into. Endgame is such a great watch as it rewards long-term fans for sticking with this series and repays them for their devotion to the series, with various characters popping up such as Peggy Carter, Alexander Pierce, Jasper Sitwell, Brock Rumlow, and even a surprise appearance of Ty Simpkins' character Harley Keener. That was especially surprising for me, and I know he is because I've seen the other films, seen Iron Man 3, but there are a lot of articles going around saying who actually is this character. But of course for long-term fans, they understood this reference, and it's a nod to all the fans who have kept with the series and actually paid attention. Infinity War was great because it didn't stop to explain the plot. Essentially, it said to audiences, hey, there have been 19 films before this, keep up. And Endgame did the exact same thing, and they said, hey fans, thank you for keeping with us for 11 years. Here's some callbacks which actually served the purpose of the plot and did very well in fleshing out the whole universe. At no point was a cameo character appearance pointless. They all made sense as to why they would be there at that point in time. The Russos did an awesome job of showing respect and gratitude to Marvel's legions of fans, and none of this fan service was ever too on the nose. Okay, so Carol Danvers is barely in the film. Whilst I enjoyed her solo film, I didn't think Captain Marvel have been given much personality. I think this is kind of similar to the Doctor Strange solo film. What the Russos though did with Doctor Strange in Infinity War was fantastic, and they've made Strange a pivotal character moving forward within the MCU. However, Captain Marvel is absent through much of this film. She just basically flies off into space to never be heard of until the film's final climax. It felt very much the Russos weren't overly sure of what to do with the character, so just need to get her off screen. Whilst Captain Marvel not being in the movie didn't ruin my enjoyment of the film, I just felt it was a shame the character wasn't built or grown in any way within Endgame. It definitely would have been a difficult task though, and I just think the Russos didn't want to dedicate the finale of this saga with building up a new character, as that wasn't the focus or aim of Endgame. It does feel the MCU will need to Professor X Captain Marvel in some way. Professor Xing is basically when a character is too powerful, so needs to be depowered or absent from the plot in some way, as they've made Captain Marvel too powerful. I mean, Thanos literally headbutts her and she doesn't even flinch. I think the overpowered nature of Captain Marvel will have to be addressed in further films, as when she's on screen it feels all the film's problems can literally be solved by her. Alan Silvestri returns to compose the score for Endgame after doing Infinity War's score. Marvel films have always struggled with their scores. They've never been particularly great or built up any tension or suspense. Silvestri has changed that with his two scores for Infinity War and Endgame. Silvestri excels by making a score which builds a sense of epicness to the story and places you on the edge of your seat as the vast orchestra builds in volume. It's fantastic Marvel have addressed this glaring problem in their films and hired a highly talented composer to add something extra to their films. The score in Endgame doesn't disappoint, even if it is a bit samey to Infinity War, but I think you can literally see these two films as one massive film. The soundtrack however surprised me. Whilst Infinity War was compiled of original score music, Endgame seemed to lead heavily into soundtrack music using a lot of Guardians-esque music. This was especially apparent with the Kinks' supersonic rocket ship. It was a nice addition for these obscure songs, even though if it did feel a little out of place and more suited to be in a Guardians film instead of an Avengers flick. The future of the MCU is in a very interesting state. Whilst Endgame doesn't end the universe, the finale does feel somewhat the end, without actually being the end. It's an odd position to be in. Whilst it's hard to tell what Marvel will do next, I believe the universe will benefit from some sort of hiatus after Spider-Man Far From Home is released, allowing audiences some time to breathe, the epicness of Endgame, and speculate on where the Marvel Universe will go next. The only confirmed slate of films for Phase 4 are Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3 and Black Widow, with various other sequels in the works. Kevin Feige said that the Marvel films will be seen as everything before Endgame and everything after, with two distinctive story arcs. And he was exactly right. I think Marvel for the time being will focus on telling smaller, more self-contained stories, similar to how Phase 1 began, before ramping up the universe to a much larger story. It will be hard for the MCU to outdo itself, and I'm sure Marvel Studios will want to do something big and not simply be seen as a one-trick pony of a large culmination story at the end of a slate of films. With the introduction of the X-Men and Fantastic Four, however, some new and interesting ways to take the universe are open to the MCU, with more flagship characters being added to the wider scope of Marvel stories. This will definitely keep fan interest alive. Marvel will of course carry on the tradition of building their lesser known characters, such as Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, the Eternals and Namor, which is something I would prefer. However, Endgame does a fantastic job of setting up further stories for the MCU, in particular Sam Wilson as Captain America and Thor joining the Guardians of the Galaxy. All stories I can't wait to be played out on screen. Endgame was definitely the conclusion of this series of films, but also the start of something new. So there's my in-depth look at the major talking points from Avengers Endgame. If you made it to this point, it's almost a 20-minute long video. I mean, it took ages to make this, so if you did watch at this point, please do give it a like, please subscribe, and as always, please leave a comment on what you thought about Avengers Endgame. I don't usually ask that, but as this video took so long, I think I've deserved a like and a comment, and even a subscription. But as always, thank you for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I will see you again soon. Thank you, bye bye.